what you see and different people. Like now I can see somebody in Australia, what they're doing, what they're up to. How do they live their life in the day of, you know?
Yeah.
And so as great as that is, you could take tips and notes and the whole thing. It's kind of sad. It makes everybody feel like what they have is not enough or not good. It's just not good. And so we're like straying away from like the idea of what we have is good.
Welcome to Guys That Listen. I'm Peter, and today we got a special guest, Steph, on the podcast.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Steph. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Stephanie. I'm from LA actually, but I was born in Puerto Rico. So I'm a LA native, raised here for years, and sadly no longer live here. It's a touchy subject, but yes, I now live in Hawaii, and so I'm just back for a little bit. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. There's a lot there, but hey.
Yeah, I know you said it's a touchy subject, but that kind of just means we have to go right into it.
Okay, fair. God. Yes. Gosh, where to start? Because I'll just say homesickness. We can start there. Simply because you forget the things that LA sets you up for. And when I say that, I really just mean that in the way of you forget what's at your disposal. Things that you have like at the palm of your hands. Like you want to be creative in any shape, way, or form. Like go ahead, live your best life. It's there. And then you have other people that are in that space too, though, that are willing to be creative with you. Even if it's a different type of creative, they're like as excited as you are. And you're just like, oh, I love that. Right. And so moving to a place in which one culture completely different, right? I'm also used to like a nice little melting pot. And I say that because we have a little bit of everything. You name it, we got it. And so you're in a much more intentional like space where you're alone. And I say alone because I'm away from my loved ones. And I'm with my partner out there. And it's tough because the adjusting phase of it all. I also moved out there 30 years old. So mind you, I'm pretty like used to a certain thing. I'm used to foods. I'm used to certain ways of doing things. And so the shock value was high, like high. And for a person like me, I feel so deeply. And so I'm used to being so easily connected to my community. I feel like my slate completely blank. At 30 years old, you're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
So it's tough because I will get emotional about it time and time again. It just doesn't go away.
You said it's been 2 years?
It's going on 2 years. This November will be 2 years. And here I am. Like, it feels like an alternate universe. Like, I'm like, what? I come back home and I just tap right back into my life. And then I go back and I'm like, whoa, like, huh? You know, so you do your best, you adjust, you get a job, you establish other goals, but you're literally like, huh? Every single time. Mind you, it's a beautiful place. Like, I mean, come on. But it doesn't take away. You can be in a beautiful place. You can be in a beautiful place and just still miss everything that like makes home.
Wow. So it sounds like it hasn't gone too much easier, and it seems like you're very homesick. So I gotta ask, why the move in the first place?
Yes. So my husband is military. He just joined, as in he joined pretty late in the game in our relationship. Mind you, we're pretty solidly established. We're going, cruising. That was a nice little curveball. And then it went from like, hey, joining the military to, hey, first station is coming around. And so it's like you literally roll the dice. Mind you, you're not really rolling it. You're letting someone else roll it. And that's, again, I think it adds to the homesickness, because one thing is to move and let that be your decision. But now it's someone else's decision and they can care less about you, your wants, your needs, right? Or even my partners as the active member. It's simply how things are done. It just is. It's how things are done.
Yeah.
That's a whole world within itself. And so we were lucky. We got a beautiful place. We got, we could have been worse. But it still doesn't take away. So it's strange. It's weird what your mind, your body will do, how it will respond to adjusting to a new place, to new people, new everything. No foundation there, right? Like your friends, your loved ones, your family, things that is like blink, throw that out the window and operate differently now, right? Because you also want to be respectful of this new space, this new place, and how they operate.
So you up and left for love.
Man, can we talk about it? I'm like, yeah.
That's
when you put it like that. I mean, I wasn't like, I didn't think about it. Like I just went and I did, and it was just like, it wasn't like I didn't ever consider staying. I'm like, well, I'm gonna go, but I didn't know how I was gonna survive it because I know how emotional I am. And I know how attached I am to certain things that are my norm. I've never left LA. So I knew I was going to go through it. Now, did I know to the extent? Oh, no.
Listening to you, I kind of feel that because I've been in relationships. I think a lot of relationships go through this when you're together long enough is you have these theoretical questions like, oh, what happens if I get a job here, or if I go to school here, would you move with me or would you stay? And I'm seeing that more and more often. I've never actually had to make that decision because we'll break up before then.
No.
But when those theoretical questions do come up, I have felt like it would be really hard for someone to pull me away from my life here. And I travel, like I get out very, very often. I see the beauty in multiple different places, and how I could see myself be there for like a certain amount of time, but not forever. And I've never once considered actually moving for a past significant other. So for you to actually pull the trigger
without even like looking, I
didn't
even look.
What do you mean?
I love that you said that because I didn't realize I didn't like think about it. I just did. And like, I think my husband has a way of approaching things of like, one, things are going to work themselves out. And two, he's a military kid. And so his level of up and go and adjusting is like solid. Mind you, I'm the complete opposite. And so I think because I trusted him and I just know that he will have my back, I kind of didn't think about it, to be honest with you. I did know, though, and what I did think about a lot was how I was going to be on an emotional level. Because as much as, yes, he understands, and yes, I didn't think about the decision like that, I was like, Steph, you're going to be a mess, girl. Like, I just knew it because I know myself. And I know when things get too quiet, like actually quiet, not like your mom's down the way, friends down the way quiet, like I can drive and drive and drive and no one's gonna be there. That's scary. Also, you're in a much smaller place. Ain't no driving. There's not much you can drive to. Like, it's like, again, I didn't think about it because I was like, I can't prep for it. I can't anticipate the struggles I'm gonna go through. So I said, look, I'm gonna take a thing at a time, a problem, an issue at a time. And that's how I went about it. Mind you, did those issues just like feel like the biggest wall just like came tumbling down and took me out every single day? Sure. And I think what I didn't expect was the level. Like, I probably sound so dramatic, but like, I'm gonna be so raw with you if I can be.
Of course.
Like, I've had, and it's kind of pathetic and embarrassing to say because I've literally had a 3-hour solid crying session on my floor, like ongoing. And I don't even know that any thoughts in particular were like going through my mind, I was just like going and going and going. And mind you, in the moment, it like felt so painful because you're just like, you feel so exposed and so like out of place. To feel out of place every single day is like, you can do a little bit, right? When you said traveling, I'm like, cool, I think I could do that too, right? You travel, it's cute, you love all the things, and then you get back to your norm. And so to me, that's what makes it hard when I hear people say, like, you live in paradise. And I'm like, yeah, I do. But try living there too, right? And so, and that's in no shape or form shading where I now live. It's simply being real about anywhere, pick anywhere on the map that you would love to go to, live there or think about living there and see if, it's like the honeymoon phase.
Yes, I was actually about to say that.
It goes away. And again, not that the beauty of the place goes away and all of that has to offer for me, but it's simply you have to be in the space to take it in. I was not for like a cool minute. I would say I came to the light a few months ago, like if that.
Wow.
Because that's how much it's like internally just like ripped me. I didn't realize how much I was rooted in this place because this is all I knew. So, you operate normally and you love it and it's just that. But then, you see relationships change. You see what distance does. You see that now you have to adjust to maintaining friendships in a different way. So look, the curveball, it's like the domino. You just go one and like they all just go. They just go. And you're like, give me a break. Like, please don't knock the next one over. And that's what it's felt like.
So, but I'm curious, what are the problems that you're facing when you're out there now that the honeymoon phase is like over? Because I'm trying to grasp like where you're coming from as a
Sure.
person who has not moved, right?
Sure.
Like you're saying, I've traveled, I've gone through the honeymoon phases multiple times,
Sure.
but I've never stayed for the whole relationship. So
That's a hard question. Why? Because I feel like it encompasses a lot. One, I just think an easy one at the top of my head, there's a cultural difference, a major cultural difference. And that alone can set off those dominoes again because one thing leads to the next, to the next, to the next. Two, understanding the history to the place and being respectful and not wanting to be disrespectful on accident. Knowing that there's certain tensions that, like, I feel like in LA, you can kind of live your best life and also to an extent be oblivious to other things. Right. And so your awareness has to be really high, that one, knowing where you're at and how you're approaching things. And even if you come from X, Y, and Z, in my case, LA, that you still are mindful enough to learn, be open to learn and be open to the differences and the cultural differences. The way of being and living is much different. Here, I feel like you can go have 3 jobs and you have a photo shoot later and people are like, great, yeah, that's your day, huh? And like there, it's like, no, like you kick back, relax, and like you do your job. It's a real thing. It's a slow way of living. You enjoy life in a different way, like entirely, right? They don't have like, I don't feel like it's like super turned up like that. It's not meant to be, right? So when you strip all those things away, right, I think it exposes you as a human being differently because now you're like, okay, Steph, now what? So I'm almost like having to get to know myself on a different level now.
So you said here you could work 3 jobs, do a photo shoot after.
The whole thing.
And that was your day.
Man.
Right? And I don't know. It's just my opinion, right?
Sure.
I think when you said strip everything away, it sounds like a lot of your identity is placed within work. Whereas, somewhere in Hawaii, when you call it slow, right? A lot of it is like chilling, doing the things that you want to do. If you had free time, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you do that here. And like, to me, yeah, I did that here, but that took a creative outlet, right? To me, it was like, oh, let me go dance. Ooh, I want to shoot something. I'm having a creative idea. Let me go see who's up for like shooting this.
Mm.
And like you go and like you do those creative things and you seek those out, and there's always someone that's willing, right? That's like, yeah, that's dope. Let's shoot that. Or like, yeah, let's do that. Let's dance. Let's have a session, right? When you don't have that, when you have like, okay, beautiful place, it's even hard to take advantage because you're like, great, I have a beautiful place, but I got myself, you know.
Yeah.
What I do with it.
I mean, a lot of that comes with community, right? And finding your tribe, your community, and new places typically difficult, especially if you don't have roots in it somewhat, right? Like I'm Vietnamese. If I go back to Vietnam, probably wouldn't be super difficult for me to find my tribe, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But in a place that's strange enough foreign, but not crazy foreign
Right.
as Hawaii, it takes some time. I have a buddy who, funny enough, he's from Hawaii. He's from Hilo. He moved out here to pursue music because he
Okay.
came out and he's like, oh, I love the music scene. So he became a producer, DJ. And funny enough, he moved to Hawaii because, well, I won't say it's for love because he won't admit that it is. He says because of his family,
Okay.
right? So
Fair.
that was just like the cherry on top is that
Okay.
he fell in love with the girl and he decided to move back. But he has a foundation there, right? He has his family. He grew up there like most of his like childhood. So to come back, it's like he just came like how you come back here, right? It just clicks. So, you know, I can't imagine going to a completely not super foreign, but you know, strange enough to you, right? And getting accustomed, especially just you and your husband right now. And I'm assuming him being military, he's busy. He's got the things that he's got to do.
That I have
And
no control over.
yes,
Yes. And that's exactly what it is that any place can be amazing. You need community though. And I didn't realize that I mean, I had all that and some here. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like I had all that and some. And so, yes, you do your best to connect those dots. But if you don't have that sense of community, you could only do that so much. And you could want it all you want, but also just on a personal level, I like for things to happen authentically. So yeah, of course it's going to like move like a snail at that point because you're not trying to push for it either. I don't want it to feel boxy and strange and like I just want it to happen. And so I've had this like nice little solid battle with resistance for a cool minute. Constantly resisting everything. And even when I'm like, I'm in a good space, I'm not doing it anymore, you realize how you just do, you know, and you like easily revert. And so you have to be so deliberate of like dial back, dial back. Like, girl, what do you have control over at this point?
yeah. And I think it's also letting go of your identity to a certain point, right? Like now that you're in Hawaii, you're like, oh, I'm kind of a LA girl, right? And when you were here,
I feel
you,
more like an LA girl than anything because I feel like I stick out like a sore thumb
yeah, exactly.
sometimes, you know? I'm
But I think
like,
a lot of
oh,
that has to do with the fear of like losing your identity instead of
gosh.
allowing it to change. So, you know, my example would be I'm a guy who has my hands in like 10 cookie jars at once, right? Like I'll
Mm-hmm.
do everything. And for me, that was my identity for a while. Like, let me travel, let me work on 3 or 4 passion
Yeah.
projects, let me do my 9 to 5, let me do this, that. And it's just like, okay, that's who I am. And
Yeah.
then I met someone who I dated for a while, and she was the complete opposite. She was very, let's relax, let's stay in, let's get a massage and things like that. And I didn't even know how to
Interesting.
relax, so I was very resistant to the idea because I'm like, oh, what if I do this? Does that mean I'm lazy? Does that mean I'm not ambitious? And only until I just let go of that, I was like, this is kind of nice. And I think a part of me has always wanted this. I just didn't know how to let go of the other part of me.
Isn't that strange that had that not happened? And I wonder if like her interjecting in this way, like had that not happened, like would that realization have occurred at any point.
I think it would have to, if it did occur, it would have to be with another interaction that's very similar, you know, because you are a product of your environment and the people you surround yourself
Very
with,
true.
right?
Very true.
And if you don't let go of the idea that you're 100% LA girl, it's really hard for you to be somewhat of a Hawaiian girl, right? And that might actually still be in your nature because like you're Puerto Rican, right? You're not.
I mean,
Like it's not like you're here grind 24. You know, you hear this about people from New York all the time.
yes.
Yeah, they say it very similar. Like I gotta go.
Yes. Yes.
And then you put them in a place where they have to slow down. They're like, what do I do? I'm all
I
fidgety.
mean, literally, like it's in like even my driving. I'm like, right. I just got back I'm driving here. I'm like loving it. Everybody's speeding through this.
Yeah.
You know,
Like
but just
love
little,
LA traffic.
I love it. Love it.
I miss this.
It's just like the randomest, dumbest things where you're just like, Jesus, you know? But going back to what you said, that slowing down piece, and like you said, you had to purposefully say, like, I'm gonna just let me see, right? But you have to be intentional about that, and that alone feels a little awkward because you're like, dang, did I not ever think about slowing down before? But it never felt bad, right? Because you're pursuing passion projects, you're doing other things that are as fulfilling for you, and this is just a new, like, okay, well, try this, how's that? And you're like, yeah, I remember my first time going to the beach out there. I was like, wow, right? But then I was like, okay, what do I do now? Like, and I'm like constantly on this, like, I have that itch that I can't scratch of doing something and feeling productive and now I'm realizing I'm productive in a different way. I operate in a different, with different intentions. I'm doing different things out there in the same world that I did here, just differently. And I don't mean dance, I mean academically and other things that I'm going through and pursuing. But a year and I would almost say 2 solid years of that same space is exhausting.
I can imagine. I think we're in general just multifaceted individuals, right? We're not here to relax all the time. You're also not here to grind 24/7.
Yeah, you
either,
like that,
you know?
like, ooh, let me go dumb hard, and then you do your version of chilling, and that feels great, and then you feel recharged, and you're like, great, on to the next project, you know? And it's like that's how you make sure your cup is filled. And so when like there's like anything that alters that, it just kind of like disrupts the whole system. And here I am trying to make sure the system gets it together.
So with all this, the moving and you just kind of realizing your life is different now in Hawaii than it was in LA. I'm just assuming that your husband is your rock.
Yeah, man. He sees all the craziness, like all of it. And I say that jokingly, but almost like serious too, right? Because he has seen the like it's almost like as a partner, I'm like, damn, what would you do if, you know, you see someone going through this range of emotions and like you're thinking that they're like making progress or doing better, right? And then they just like go back and they're having a real tough time and they're just having like an actual like breakdown, you know, like just bad, you know. I took on going to the gym and became wildly obsessed with it because it felt so good to feel external pain as opposed to like this emotional pain that was really irritating. That I was just like, girl, I ain't got no more like tears left to cry, like, you know. And it was at the smallest things, at anything that felt so different. I was just so tired of that same emotion that I'm like, you know. But I'm like, damn, as a partner to see like, you know, I'd be like, oh great, you're going to the gym, right? And then I come back and I'm like completely in tears and breaking down, and I'd be like, dang, I wouldn't know how to be there for that person.
I would not either, to be honest. So I'm curious, what do you think he did for you during those times? Because I can't imagine that you moved from LA to Hawaii, you uprooted your life to some place completely different. And, you know, now that we talked about For Love, that he probably in his mind somehow, some way knew that he would have to comfort you.
Yeah.
Right? Because
he knew,
he's used to it.
Man, he knows this little emotional person. He knows that. And I say that jokingly, but I'm so serious. Like I feel a little too hard sometimes, and I'm like, okay, you know?
Yeah.
And I think his approach was just one, letting me go through the feels, hearing me when he needed to, and knowing that still that would not be maybe enough. And like kind of having to be okay with that. And like being okay with the level of like slight resent that just naturally exists as humans. You have to know that like one, it's not personal like that. I didn't like suddenly like dislike him. It was hard. It was so hard. And he was seeing me go through the growing pains time and time again. And so he could just sit there and sit with me in the like not so niceness. That's as much as he could do. Like, I think it was kind of like a defeating moment for us both, but it was nice that he knows how to be graceful in that and he's not as emotional as I am. So there's that balance, right? It's not like we're both like they're crumbling. So there is that offset. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so it helped ish, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't solve the problem, but yeah,
Yeah.
it can alleviate it to a certain degree.
Sure.
So, being that you moved, didn't really think about it too much, right? Because
No.
you love this man, you're married to him. It's been 2 years. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've had time to think and maybe have a conversation or two about it at this point, right?
Yeah. I like this space because now I realize, damn, I kind of haven't been alone in that. He just doesn't experience it the same way I do, but he feels pretty similar. He's like, damn, like he has moments now, and he's vocalized this where he's like, damn, I miss LA. I want to go back home. And I'm like, yeah. And now we can make the differences. We can pinpoint what it is exactly we miss. Now it's not just a smack of differentness. It's, you know, it's just now it's like, ooh, that. Ooh, that's comforting. Ooh, that's nice. You know, things that we're just used to. And now it's nice because now we can just be like, yeah, you know, and it almost feels like we're on the same page, you know? Mind you, here I am like coming out, seeing the light from my emotional, you know, whatever you want to call it. And now we're in this space. And I never considered once that he felt what I did or even missed home at all. I thought, well, you're good at up and moving, so I'm sure you're fine. He's also lived there before. Forgot to mention that. He went to high school there. And so to me, I was like, ugh, what an extra disadvantage that I am, you know? Because this was like, I hadn't even visited. I hadn't even been to the place before. And so I think I always held that against him. And the space where now was like, you know, no, he's like, I hear you and I feel you. I miss home too. You know, he's like, this is different than when I was last here. He's like, I'll tell you that much. You know, because I would jokingly say things like, you said it was great. But mind you, that was pre-COVID and a lot of things have changed, as many places around the world have changed post-COVID.
So I want to talk to you about resentment,
Yeah.
right? Because we are humans,
Yeah.
we're emotional beings, and those feelings do come out. And sometimes they're rational, sometimes they're not, but you feel it regardless. So in a relationship, in a very committed one, a marriage, how do you and your husband deal with feelings of resentment?
I will say I'm just, and I don't even know if this is a good thing, pretty blunt. And so I do not sugarcoat my emotions when I'm feeling them and how I'm feeling them. And again, I don't say that that's always a good thing, because sometimes they'll come out without filter. Or they'll come out in a way where you're like, it can feel personal. It can feel like an attack. Yeah. How do we deal with that? I think we come to the table very honestly. We say what it is, you know. I definitely vocalize my emotions. And I think most of the time it's him listening, because again, he doesn't feel as intensely as I do. And so usually he's just trying to like find, okay, cool, where do we meet in the middle? Where in all of what you're feeling can I meet you in the middle to see, to at least like level with you and see where we're at with things. In the most recent way that we experienced that, which was me feeling like, well, we're here because of you. Yeah. It's yikes. He was wildly graceful because I think he kind of knew I would go there. That's kind of gross to say. I'm not proud because I wouldn't want that from my partner. And I think I'd never viewed it this way because he always meets my very nicely intense emotions with, like, that's normal. Like, hey, yeah, I'm expecting that from you. And he could also not be that. And I never considered that. He could also be mad and be like, well, you came here, right? But he kind of like never hit me with that. And I swear to you, I'm having this realization as we're talking because he just kind of didn't go there.
I think what it is, especially in relationships, is that you can't fathom those things happening until you're in a situation where it can happen.
It's a scary thing.
It is, but I think that's what it is though with relationships is that we could tell each other so many things like I'm this guy, I do this, you're this girl, you do this, and this is how we work our relationship.
Yeah.
But until you're in a position where it's like, oh, now it's kind of put to the test, then you can really see how things unravel, right?
Talk about to the test. And like, it's not until you talk about it out loud and maybe with someone else outside of that person that you realize, dang, you really did that with grace. Because I will tell you, I came in hot.
Really?
Like hot, Yeah, because I will go from real sad to real mad to real sad again. Like, yeah. I just like, and that's just because I'm like frustrated at feeling tired and sad because I'm usually not that, I'm usually in a level-headed space and I do a lot of work to foster that. And so when I'm too much in a chaotic space, it gets me out of whack. And I try to like target what the issue is. And guess who was the target? I'm like, it was you. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't. It just simply wasn't. And I think, damn, yeah, we just kind of graced right past through that and never really, well, I would say I never really took accountability for being that intense. Yeah. I just kind of expected him to understand my level of intenseness, which he did. Not that that's fair. It's not fair.
I've kind of been on both sides, right? I usually try to stay very stoic in relationships, but I've also had moments where I blow up.
Yeah.
And I can say from my personal experience, a lot of it is because what you believe is right to do.
Yeah.
Which is remain cool and calm and collected. But you're also human, right? There is like a, in the negative side of filling your cup where it overfills and you can't really think logically or rationally as to how you should handle this situation, right? Mm-hmm. And I've done that so many times where I'm like, I catch myself at that point where I blow up. And what I've come to realize is that I've held too much back.
Yeah.
Because you want to be that responsible person. I think that comes in a lot of like hetero relationships with males in general, is that as us guys, like, I think the presenting anger and rage is not very healthy, and it's actually probably very demonized, right?
Yeah.
Because we're males, like we could be very, very scary, and I've seen that firsthand, in other relationships. So we rather present ourselves as this very stoic, calm, and collected individuals, so that way you don't feel fear in a relationship, right? Because who wants to fear their partner?
Just kind of sad because I hate that you guys have that expectation, right? Because I guess to an extent, as a woman, sometimes you can kind of fly off the handles a little bit and feel very intensely. And you're like, well, I just felt really intensely, right? And I do wonder sometimes, I'm like, do y'all have the same, you guys probably don't have that same way of being able to approach that, right?
I think it depends. I think it depends if you're allowed to express yourself in different ways. Yeah. What I mean is, obviously you should express yourself to your significant other no matter what.
Sure.
But, let out like consistently but gradually, versus just stockpiling it up till you can't take it anymore.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's another thing with guys is we find different ways to alleviate that pressure. Now at this age we go golfing. What I mean? Some of us go bowling, some of us play pickleball, whatever the hell it is, you know what I mean? And it helps kind of dumb it down a little bit, so that way we have a level head to where we could have a conversation with our significant other without blowing up.
Yeah.
But again, that's kind of like a band-aid, and it's not really a solution to the problem, you know? And I think until there's like a common ground on how you guys would like to be spoken to, because this is something that I've been learning more and more as of late, and that is communicating in a way that the other person can listen to you, right? Or
That
understand.
is like major key. I think that that's a different level of being aware of not only yourself, but you as a partner. And if you can do that, one, it's wildly considerate because now you're like, cool, we can get somewhere. Because often when you don't do that, you don't realize you're really falling on deaf ears. Like you really are.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll just be too, going at it, and there's nothing being like, it's not going many places. I agree with you 1,000% on that one. Just like, where are you? Where do you stand? Where can I like fit myself to where I can be heard by this person? How can they feel like I'm leveling with them? It has to be a reciprocation for sure.
100%. And I think, again, it just takes that situation for that conversation to arise, because you could establish boundaries and like guidelines of how you want to talk to each other.
Yeah.
But certain situations don't really allow that kind of like level headedness,
Yeah.
If shit's hitting the fucking fan, sometimes you can't keep your cool.
It's true.
And when that situation arises, you're like, oh shit, that kind of caught me on guard. You're like, whoa, where'd that come from? And now you can have that conversation like, hey, I know that I told you before that I don't like you raising your voice, but I understand right now that you're not in the most clear state of mind. So when we're in this situation like that, can you let me know what's bothering you? And maybe we could alleviate it a little bit before you blow up.
Yeah. I mean, you have to find the sweet spot time and time again. And that sweet spot can change.
Of course.
And that's the strange part, I think, about relationships sometimes, that you're like, wait, this used to work. Ooh, may not work this time around. And knowing when that happens and being able to say like, okay, this no longer works. Like what can we do to switch that up is fair too, I think. As that relationship continues to, you're like continuously morphing into different individuals. And so you have to come back to the table to see like, okay, cool. How are we on the same page again? Like, can we get on the same page again? And you do that all the time, every now and then. When you feel like you're like straying away a little too far, you like bring it back. And I think, at least for me, that has always worked. And that's what makes it flow really nicely. It's like the beauty of relationships, hey?
I mean, if you guys are working on a relationship, typically means that your lives are intertwined to a certain degree, right? And what you want to do is build your own way of communicating and refining that process. Too many people, I think, nowadays expect it to just fall into place.
Yes.
And like, oh, we naturally just get each other. And you hear this a lot too, and I feel like this is bad, but maybe this is just like the negative person I am. But when people mention things like, oh, we don't argue, like we've been together for 10 years, we never argued. And you could take that as like a award. Well, a lot of times I feel like there's a lot being avoided.
For sure.
As necessarily, there's this thing in like psychology, they call it the persona and the shadow. I don't know if you heard about that. And, like I was talking about how guys feel like we need to be stoic to not present a threat to our partner.
Sure.
Right? We depress this emotion of rage or anger, and I've definitely bit my tongue a fair amount of times.
That's like a scary thing. You don't want that.
You don't, and it comes out one way or another.
Oh, it's going to. It's almost like you could only keep that lid closed for so long. So if I were to hear that same comment of like, yeah, we never argue, I'd be scared. I'm like, what's beneath the surface? What's ready to, like, at any given moment, whatever situation, let the circumstances be perfect for that to come out. You want to be raw enough, and I think that's why I'm as unapologetic as I am with my emotions, because one, I think it allows for us to have really uncomfortable conversations often. And so to me, I think between him and I, we're okay with uncomfortable conversations. And so the more that people can get into that space, I'm like, you're golden. The problem is people don't like having uncomfortable conversations, especially nowadays. You avoid them at all costs. You patch them up. You make them cute. You just make it work somehow. But you're not getting anywhere with that, right? Mind you, I'm not saying come with the same level of intensity as like my deepest levels of sadness, right? But you can come with yourself and just be straight up and just say, hey, look, there's a whole elephant in this room. I know you see it, right? And so you can just be real. But I think there's a lot of fear in that for most people. There's too much uncertainty as to what if I come too strong? What if the person thinks I'm killing our little vibe of being, this like very easygoing person?
Yeah, I think there are measures to make sure that the way you communicate is effective too, because I've definitely been the person to blow up, and I've learned that from like a long relationship after multiple situations where I've done that, to where now I understand it's not really I'm depressing like a emotion. So for instance, an example is I used to love, I don't want to say arguing things out, but for the sake of the conversation right now, arguing things out as it happened in real time.
Okay.
Right. With my significant other, they're like, no, we're going to talk about this right now.
Okay.
While I'm having this very intense
yikes.
emotion, like we need to solve it now. Like, we're not going to sleep angry, that kind of thing. And it just never worked out. It just never worked out. I was
pros
never.
and cons to that. There's a lot. You have to contain so much.
You
You can admire the fact that someone really does want to resolve something, but then also because you're emotionally intense, that could go many of which ways. And I hear you on that one.
Yeah, I can imagine after talking to you a little bit. I can imagine we have a couple things in common.
Yeah.
And I've come to learn, at least in my scenario, that I process my emotions a lot better, and what I'm trying to convey in the conversation comes across way clearer when I walk away and allow myself to process the emotions, right?
Yeah.
Because am I here to have you hear me out and just me talk my shit? Or am I here to have a constructive conversation?
That's a good perspective, actually, because often you may not be operating from the place you think you're operating if you're trying to do all of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's why you don't ask a drunk person if they think they're drunk or not. Same thing with the angry person.
It's kind of scary.
It is, because a lot of it also comes from how we handle conversations from our childhood.
Yeah.
And we think this is how we are. This is naturally who I am. How dare you change the way I talk?
Ugh. Yeah. This is so true.
And just like how you said, oh, I've been in LA for so long, this is who I am.
True.
And if you're telling me I can't talk this way, then you're going against who I am. And do you not like me as a person?
Ooh, that runs deep.
It does.
Because it ties so much to your sense of identity. And then it's so sad because I think I have had those moments where it's like the childhood part of it comes through and you're like, right? And that's not always a positive thing. And so in general, when it comes to those things and whether resolving it in the moment or not, yeah, I hear it. Because it could be great, but then it could also not.
It's how you use it, right?
Yeah.
So when I was younger, my dad was extremely aggressive. So constantly yelling, just, raging his head off, breaking shit. And, when I was a child, I took it as like a strength. Like, oh, that means he's strong and he could fight people off. Until I saw my significant other look at me like I'm a lunatic, and which I was, rightfully, the things I was doing. She was like, what the fuck is that? Like, why are you acting like a raging lunatic? And then I saw that there was like fear, in a relationship. And I think that's very, very hard to recover from in general, even though I didn't like physically ever harm her. But the idea that it might happen is like always there, and to me, that's when I took a step back and like dialed it down, because I'm like, okay, am I acting like this? Like wanting to get things resolved now because I want things my way, or is it because I want things resolved?
And what was the answer?
I think it was just because I want things my way. And I thought that's how I am, like as a human being. That's the family that I was born into. And I thought if this is something that you want to change about me, then you don't want to be with me.
Right.
And that was like you denying me as like a
And
person.
how did that come to the forefront?
I think it was because I scared my significant other. Like, I
Yeah.
think it was because I yelled and I broke shit just like how my dad did. And I saw the same look in their eyes as my mom's eyes when she looked at my dad. And, I told myself, funny enough, like growing up, that I did not want to be like my dad in that aspect. And yet I saw it in myself, and I hated that.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to get past it. I'm still working on it. It's something that I found myself at times when I let my guard down
Ye-
to express myself in my old ways.
Isn't
And
that wild? I mean, I don't think that I'm not necessarily happy that situation happened, but I'm glad that it occurred so that you're able to have that realization. Sometimes we can't take a step back unless something crucial happens. And that's the only time that we're able to switch that lens that we're viewing things from for a brief second and be like, hold on, I don't think whoa, I thought I was doing da 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 da, but clearly that's not what's happening. And so I don't, yeah, again, I'm not glad that that happened, but one thing I will say, I am glad you had that awareness, that it came through, that you were even able to be accountable enough in that moment to be like, oh, and maybe it didn't happen right away, right? But it happened.
yeah,
And to me, it happening alone is solid, right? It's important. And hopefully now I feel like you're viewing that differently. And I feel like I've been in those similar situations where I'm just like, dang, not proud of that, right? I will always very proudly say I feel intensely and this and that, but that doesn't also ever give you the excuse to like off the handles. And so you have to know when that happens to simply be like, whoa, that happened. My bad. This is where I'm at with it, right? And it's like kind of like a little tug of war because you're constantly finding this space of like, okay, you're staying flexible, but you're trying to find a space and the thing that will work right now, right? Until the next whatever such.
yeah. I think what it is for me was that I couldn't tell the difference between who I was. Like, was I acting out because this is how I innately am as a person,
Yeah.
or because of my traumas from when I was younger? If I was born into a family where my dad wasn't, acting up like that, would I be that angry person too? And now that I look at it, because I try to really feel things out as far as like what aligns with me and what doesn't. I believe that I'm a kind person. Like, naturally, I think that's what aligns with me the most. I'm not very like, I have moments where I'm like machismo and stuff like that, but I think that is ingrained for me from my dad, and that's what I would say has been passed down from his family and, his parents and so on and so on, generations, right? And just like how you're saying, like, it took this awareness and, those generations, families, like, they never got that awareness, right? Because they kept on passing it down.
Sadly.
And it gets to this point where we're more aware of how our actions kind of could affect other people, especially,
sure.
Your kids, right?
For sure.
And, I learned about this recently, and, they describe people, or, doctors describe learning as like being malleable, right? Like neurologically malleable. Because if you're not malleable in your thoughts and how things could change and be more effective or better, then you're not learning.
No,
because
you're
set
staying
in your way.
stagnant. And I think that happened to be the approach that was a little bit more of a norm for those past generations, which is why I think we're in the space that we're in now, because we're adapting to this, the idea of like, yeah, there is such thing as it being a flexible thing, and we can change, and we have the ability to realize, okay, cool, that happened, it was a negative thing, does it have to stay that way forever? And so my question to you is, did you go deeper, and did you give that any more thought? Did you entertain where that really came from for you, aside from the obvious, right, knowing that your dad was a little bit more explosive in this way and how he went about things?
I did. I dug into a lot more due to what I like to do is like read about things and see how different authors or writers or doctors, scientists intersect these ideas that
Sure.
they don't even talk about with each other.
Okay.
So one thing was, very similar. It's like when we talked about the shadow, right? And one of the things that I deemed as my shadow after a while was that anger and that rage and that fieriness, right? I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, that's bad. That's evil. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you can't be like that because you could hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
So I toned it down, right? I toned it down to where it almost seems like I'm passive at times.
Mm.
And that also means that I'm not able to voice up for things that I believe in because I avoid hurting people, right? By not saying those things. So it's like I depressed it so much that I'm losing part of my voice.
Yeah.
Right. And I try to look at it now because the range of emotions you feel, you're supposed to feel it.
Right.
And it could be a bad thing or it could be a superpower, right? You
Hey,
have
amen
choices how
to
you do it.
that.
So someone who speaks very passionately, right, very fiery, has the power to move people,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're very charismatic, they're very convincing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
And in certain ways where I want to do that now, I'm not like perfect at it. I'm able to regain my voice and channel that person instead of using it just to overwhelm someone, which
Yeah.
was what I was doing prior. You know, I would use my voice to overwhelm and criticize and ridicule you, and that
Giving
wasn't
different
like,
outlets is nice.
yeah,
Giving it different spaces to exist in, knowing that it's like you don't have to go all the way away. You just have to be a little tamed, you
yeah.
know?
And what you use it for, you know,
Yeah.
your purpose in it, right?
Yes.
You could be angry and use it to be constructive. Right? You
Absolutely.
don't have to necessarily be sounding very monotone to be the voice of reason.
Yeah, I don't think that that's, yeah, I don't think at all that to me, I find that like you shouldn't have to mute yourself. I think it just needs a little more tuning up. And I think more than half of us are like tuning up all the time because like we're just trying to find things that work.
Mhm.
And it's okay that it's not like the most perfect, version of what we're trying to get to, but it's in the right direction, and I'm all right with that. Like I think that within itself is nice. It's being worked on, you know.
You got a great point there, and I think that's what it is that you're allowing for these things to happen, and whether or not you deem it as a mistake, your your main goal is to improve on it and
Sure.
refine it, right? And I think that's what it is that, you know, the couples who don't really have conversations about this, and you know, maybe people understand the word argument differently, right? I
Yes.
think there are arguments that do nothing. They'll move the needle, maybe moves the needle back. There are arguments that can move the needle forward, right? It's like I'm going to tell you what I think. Maybe we have a conflicting idea, but let's figure out how we could either meet in the middle or
Mm-hmm.
better understand each other at the very least, right? Make it a productive conversation. So,
Yeah.
you know, you allowing that, especially like this is how I am honestly, but let's have a discussion on how you receive it and how you
Yeah.
want to receive it,
I
right?
know it's a lot. I know because I allow my emotions to come to the forefront so easily. I know that like it definitely must not be the easiest to see from afar, be with, and to manage, right? And to feel like a supportive person on top of that. And so I appreciate his grace time and time again. I appreciate his patience, right? Beautiful qualities, one that I'm still like trying to, make sure that I have back. Because as much as I am this, I think it's only fair for him to be able to also come to the forefront with whatever he may be feeling, right? And for me to have something to like work through and give grace on and approach. And again, I don't think if it was up until like this moment where I realized how great he's managed my level of resistance, my sadness, my level of like, what the heck is going on, man? Like, dang. And I think that kind of came from not prepping, but I couldn't have prepped. I couldn't have prepped for this level of change. It's intense, I think, for any human being, let alone when it's not necessarily either of your like deliberate choice,
Yeah.
and it wasn't for us both. So we just kind of were like, we're going to get through this. We're going to do the thing. And it's been a lot, but also beautiful and reinforcing because now I look at him like, dang, dude. Like, it's nice. It's nice. It's nice to know you have such a beautifully solid human being that loves you.
Would you say you're, I hate using this word, but my vocabulary is limited. Would you say you're more on the clingier side or more independent side?
Dang, can I say both? Because I embody both very, very much so. And I say that just because I love physical touch. So I love hugs. And he knows this. I'm always like, can I have a hug? And like I ask for hugs often because I love them. But even my friends know this about me. I hug on my friends like so much. I just grab them and touch them and this and that. And like I'm just that. I just love that, right? Because it's expressive. It's like I love you, you know? And we've just kind of like geared the other way when it comes to this stuff. And to me, that hasn't necessarily discouraged me because to me, if there's any way that I can show you like I love you, I'm gonna show it, right? I'm not just gonna say like, yeah, right? To me, that's like a little disconnected. And so that's just how I go. So yeah, there's a clingy but independent side. I mean, hey, definitely. When I met him first, I've lived on my own for a good amount of time. And so I've wildly maintained that same mindset throughout even like our relationship and our marriage, that like I just always have that side to me always, and not in a negative way, and just as in I think we can both operate as like actual individuals and not just the morphed version of us in a marriage, of us as loving people, right? So I love that he's his own person, I'm my own person, we love each other, this is why we're together. But it doesn't have to be this morphed version and that's all that exists, right? And mind you, everyone has a different idea of what marriage is to them. That's okay. I love that we're very much on the same page when it comes to these things, right? He's he, I am him, me, and we both respect that, right? And then we're us, you know, we love being us. And I love being us often because that's my guy.
So I know I asked you if you're more clingy or independent. You kind of gave me an answer of both,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
I kind of see from your perspective, you know? And I kind of want to ask you, do you feel like you've lost a little bit of yourself when moving, when the signs move? Is that why you're a little bit more reluctant as to the change?
The short answer to that is like, yes, for sure. Yes. Now I'm trying to figure out like, yes, dot, dot, dot. Yeah. That's exactly what probably happened, is that my sense of identity was so tied to many different things. The list goes on as to what this place offers here, this city. And being stripped of that, I'm like, okay, so what's left? You know, it wasn't like necessarily like a reinvention of sorts, but I did do this. I said, it's only me. So I decided to tap in with myself. It wasn't nice. It kind of still isn't. As in like tap in as in if I wasn't journaling then, I mean, I'm only like I'm doing 10 pages now, you know,
Yeah.
per session. But also processing the difficult emotions by myself and not being afraid of, I was like, you know what? I need to like go somewhere by myself. Like, you know, what day can I squeeze in the middle of the week? Like, let me go. I love going to the beach. And I'm like, and now it's down the road. And I'm like, I can actually go. There's no traffic. I'm like, okay, let me go. And it's weird to say, but I was scared. You feel so out of place. You literally feel like you're like an alien walking. I know I sound dramatic. I know I do. I know I do. But like when everything, like you just feel like, oh my gosh, like, okay, is this normal? Like I'm being normal. I'm going to the beach, right? Like it just, you feel so like seen and then not. And so doing that for so long, now I'm like, okay, I'm in a better, much better place of, you don't have to necessarily leave the stuff that existed in LA. There's like, I like to say it's like a morphed version of me that now exists there. doing different things, tapping into things that are still beneficial to my life and bring me happiness, just in a different way. Here, I was able to tap into my creativity so much more. All my friends dance and do amazing things, and I love doing those things with them. And I don't have that out there, you know? And so I decided to go back to school, which was on my to-do list anyway. I never thought I'd go to grad school out there, but hey,
Nice.
here we are. And even just going to orientation, I like felt I had a sense of purpose again. And I'm like, dang, that's what I missed. That here, like, I felt amazing dancing. All these things made me feel like I had purpose. And going there, I had all these beautiful things, but I no longer had. I was like, so what is purpose here? What does that mean here? You know, I work for a domestic violence program. I'm a counselor.
Wow.
And so when I moved there, I was like, I've also never worked with the domestic violence population. I've always been in mental health ish, just not domestic violence. And that's a whole different world within itself. So I'm like, wow, what a different Steph, you know, like here I am transitioning to this new place and this is my new job. This is what I do now. And so I've been now there for 2 years and am now going back to, and I'm like, I feel purposeful. I can do the thing. I can still dance, you know, I can still do all the things. They just look differently. They're different. You tap in differently. And now I can reap the benefits of some of that work that I was able to do, like sit in my grossness and sadness. And now I don't feel as bad. I can appreciate it. I'm open to friendships. I'm open to meeting people. So maybe now the sense of community can slowly seep in. Maybe all along I wasn't ready for it. I wanted it, but it wasn't going to happen overnight. And so the resistance taught me a lot. Kind of how to navigate without really me knowing. I thought I was on no path. I was like, this is going nowhere. um, and it's weird. It kind of has all those pieces have been part of the puzzle all along. And it's so scary because when you feel so out of place, so everything's changing before you could even figure it out, to come to the realization that those pieces all made sense from the get-go, you're like, who the hell's behind this? Because you're like, you know, you don't think you're going to have a sense of normalcy again. You don't think things are going to make sense because you're like, no, they only make sense in LA back home.
You were scared, and it was scary. And I think a lot of finding community and exploring and allowing yourself to kind of just see what's out there is really hard to do when you feel scared.
Yeah. And it's going to feel weird. You're going to feel like an alien.
Yeah.
I was already feeling like an alien. And here I am, like everything, like again, that lens, I like to call it. If I'm looking at it from this lens only, if I'm not willing to switch that lens, it could have not been that all along. It was how I was perceiving interactions. I was perceiving everything to be much more worse than it was because of my sadness. I just wanted to be back home. I wanted to have the interactions I'm used to having. You know, talk about resistance times 10, man. Now that I look at it, you know, it was too much of that.
All at
I
once.
won't say it's all gone, but it's a lot better.
The other reason why I asked if you're more clean or independent is because you've now moved to a different state with your husband. And I'm assuming because you don't have your friends and your family, or, you know, maybe new friends, but the ones that are in LA are farther away from you now, that you probably spend more time with your husband
Yes.
now than prior.
I joke about it all the time. I'm like, dude, we haven't killed each other. But no, like really, for whatever crazy reason, like we've been pretty in sync this way, like throughout our relationship. And so aside from like annoying moments where like I'm just like annoyed and he's annoyed, it's kind of just like no different in that way. We just obviously miss being able to interact with our loved ones or other people. But aside from that, little by little, we're like finding our way there, and we're like, okay, cool. We're getting out to do things. And that is the blessing. You get to do really adventurous things out there. Like you don't do like, you know, you get to go swim with sharks and fish, you know?
That's pretty adventurous.
Like, yeah, and you see turtles randomly at the beach. You know, you're just like there floating and you're like, hey, like that's you, the priceless moments. Crazy thing is, some of the most beautiful things are free. And so, like, yeah, we get out and we just do things like that. And it like doesn't feel, you know, that's more like when we're like home all day and we're like, I'm over
Yeah.
it. And so, again, naturally as humans, you'll have that. But yeah, it hasn't necessarily been a shift in that way. We definitely have relied on each other more emotionally because for a while there I was going through it. And yeah, now it's just like we're kind of just like easing into it, finding our space, doing the things, you know, for me at least getting used to the water because, you know, in LA, you don't go to the beach like that. You're definitely not swimming. So here I am trying to like learn how to dive and do other things. I'm like,
Wow.
how do you use this? I don't know, you know, snorkel gear and just stuff like that. And so I'm learning to find beauty where I'm at and not just external beauty, like just like the little things. You know, I literally enjoy skies and sunsets and like I'm always still literally like rainbow, like, you know, like, and so you have to learn. This is the biggest thing for me. You have to romanticize your own life because if you don't do it, it that's helped me get excited, you know. And my husband said it best, like when I was like in a slightly like draggy moment about like grad school because I was like, yikes, I've been out of school for 5 years. He's like, think of it as your last go. Enjoy it. Go to the basketball games, have fun, enjoy it. See it as like something exciting you're doing as opposed to like I have to complete this task, which is usually how I will approach it. Like undergrad, I have to complete. Don't enjoy the in-betweens, just complete it. Check it off, right? And so you're always seeking like that. Such a too much of a futuristic point of view can F you up because where's the present? Then you look back and you're like, so what did I enjoy really? And I have that now there. When I tell you being present is the most beautiful things, I notice skies, I notice bugs that are beautiful, like the smallest things. And you have to make it the best. It's your life. You had another day to live it. Why does it have to be this? You know, so now, of course, I sank into the, oh, great, Steph, you spent 2 years being sad. But I won't even go into that. So it's like, you know, give yourself grace through it. Give yourself grace. I've learned it. Learning, correction, learning it still.
I think it takes that though. Like what you're going through for 2 years for you to kind of see it like this. I have a friend he's like a restaurateur. Been in the restaurant business forever, opened up a couple and does well for himself, right? He's also Vietnamese. He went to Vietnam and he spoke to this guy who's out there. His family owns, I think, like a walnut farm or something out here in California in Santa Barbara. So, you know, they're well off.
Okay.
But the guy, you know, he inherited the farm, but he actually left to go to Vietnam to teach because he went there for vacation. And he was like, wow, I don't need that much money to live like the life that I want out here. And while I can make more back in California, it's just beyond my needs. Not beyond his means because, you know, he makes plenty of money, but beyond his needs, like the things that he needs to function and like be happy. So he decided to leave that and just become a teacher in Vietnam where he makes about $2,500 a month. And that is like a luxurious lifestyle that he's living. What? And he doesn't stress and he's purposeful about the teaching part. And, you know, just coming to realize that is something that not a lot of people get to do just because you're told what you need in life, right? And then you come to terms with like, oh, is that really a need or is that a want?
That part. But you're fed that so much. And we were talking earlier about social media. Like it's so exacerbated, being able to so easily tap into everyone's lives and some. It always makes yours like merp, and it's not. And so now I'm like, look, live. When I say, and I say this often, live your best life, I mean that. Like truly live your best life. And sometimes I love that you mentioned this example of your friend because that's almost a merit to what I have experienced. It's like no one asked for it, right? I didn't ask for this to be part of my journey. But boy, has it taught me. And you realize you need, like, now what I get from it's so funny. I compare it to the very first time I went to the beach. Now I go and I literally feel so recharged and fulfilled, and because I know how to enjoy it. I don't do anything but read there, but I'm like, the water temperature is perfect. The air is perfect. I can just sit here and relax and not think of anything. I'm like, who has that? That alone is luxury. Do you know what I'm saying? Usually we're so plagued with thoughts alone. And so it kind of is a blessing that you didn't know you needed, that you didn't know your life needed. And I'm glad that he found that. It's wild because he could, like you said, be in California living it up. And who's to say he isn't, right? Back home, but just in a much different way. And different doesn't always mean bad. Different doesn't mean bad.
So you
Yeah.
said you learned how to enjoy it.
Yeah.
The word learned, I think, is great because I think when people think of enjoying something, it's something that comes naturally, but you could learn to
Yeah.
enjoy things. It's a
Yeah.
skill. It's something that you could pick up on,
I would
right?
not exercise it here. And I never knew that. I didn't know how to be that type of still. I just didn't. And now I get like wildly excited for like hikes and what I'm going to see in my hike, and like, okay, what am I going to see in the water today? Or like, like those things bring me happiness. There's very basic things that bring me happiness. And that doesn't mean that now I come back and it's any different. I still come back and like now I feel a different type of love for my friends and family. It's not bad. None of it is bad. But talk about a journey. Like, I feel like I just came out of a tornado because it took me for a whole spin, man. I didn't even know what was coming for me emotionally.
Okay, so we've been talking about your move and how you've been handling that.
Yes.
I'm sure your life is not just all rainbows and butterflies. I'm sure growing
Definitely
up
not.
in LA, it came with its fair share of setbacks
Definitely.
because we could romanticize it all we want,
Yes.
but no city is perfect.
No, absolutely not. No, quite literally.
So, what was your life out in LA like, aside from all the things that you loved about it?
Wow. Definitely struggles along the way. Trying to find a way to put this in a nutshell because it's a whole bunch. I definitely worked a lot when I lived here. I had 3 jobs.
Yeah.
And I would dance on the side and do other projects, side projects. So I was always producing, not producing. I was always going after I had my academic life. That's always existed somewhat in the back. I've worked to make a living and then had my creative space. And so it's always been like these 3 things that have kind of like, but struggles without a doubt have been a huge part of that. And I think I have lived on my own for a pretty long time. Before I met my husband, I was out of the house quite literally by 18. And so that literally had its own struggles within itself. And so I didn't have a smooth start, so it made a lot of other things bumpier than necessary because I was kind of just trying to figure out like life. I was like, whoa, how do I make a living? But once that was figured out, other things came easier. Struggles after that point were more so like day to day, like between work balance, confidence things, of course, being in like such a place like LA and pursuing dance, or anything in the entertainment world, you feel like you're so replaceable. There's so many of you is what it can feel like. And so you have to be so mentally strong here in any place. But when you pursue things of that sort, and just, you have to keep yourself so in line, which is like great. Add that to the list. Yeah. I can't say that there is one particular thing that was the biggest struggle for me. Just in general, while living here, there was a lot of little things that kind of came up along the way. Yeah, I think it would go back a little bit further from when I like was first trying to find how to like live and live on my own. Those were like the tougher years of my life.
It's not too shabby then.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
living on your own definitely is a struggle. It's expensive to live out here for sure.
Yeah.
So I think all of us could feel that unless you
Yeah.
come from a wealthy family.
Yeah.
But something that you said about feeling replaceable, and obviously there's a lot of talented people out here, a lot of people looking to climb the ladder, right?
Yeah.
Get their roles and
Yeah.
get their money up. Do you feel like that is the same in dating in any way? Because if you live in a pool of people who are that talented, that ambitious, and that driven to do these things, and you feel replaceable in a way, a career or a gig, I'm assuming dating in LA is probably very similar.
I mean, listen, from what I hear, bad, but but quite literally, yes. And I'll bring this right back into the conversation. So social media has only exacerbated this. It makes it feel like at your fingertips, you can quite literally scroll and see like beauty is in abundance, right? And like the saddest thing is that we can't get past that nowadays, because the saddest thing is that people just think, well, if we don't work out, great, I'm going to go find, like it makes it seem like it exacerbates that thought that I only then at that time felt in the entertainment industry. Now you feel it naturally and in any given time, because between what you see and different people, like now I can see somebody in Australia, what they're doing, what they're up to, how do they live their life in the day of,
Yeah.
And so as great as that is, you could take tips and notes and the whole thing. It's kind of sad. It makes everybody feel like what they have is not enough or not good. It's just not good. And so we're like straying away from like the idea of what we have is good. What you have is good. Everything. You don't have, like, you can appreciate those great things and you can take those tips and tricks and the whole thing and be like, oh, great. That's a wonderful way to do skincare. I'll do that. Oh, that worked for me. Cool. But like, it doesn't have to be now you saw that and now this is invalid. And I think that's my biggest thing, man, is that like now that's just like blown the world up. And like if there's anything I would ever want anyone to know is that, and it sounds wild, it sounds easier said than done, but like focus on what your attributes are and not physically. Yes, appreciate those. Get familiar with those. That's what you've been given. That's what is unique to you. No one on this earth looks like you. Maximize that. No one in this earth can be you on an energy level. Like they can't bring that same energy to the room. So maximize that. I think we're just so preoccupied with these other things, right? Or being...
To me, it seems like social media has made people more cookie cutter.
Ugh.
Right? This is like the prime example of what you should be as a woman or a man or a teacher or a mentor, things like that. But just like how you're saying, everyone's unique, right?
Like be that.
And it's unfortunate because a lot of people fall into that trap of that expectation, right? Like, I'm not sure if you could tell, but I'm not a rich dude from Dubai. I'm not about to fly you out on like a jet, right? But that's not my selling point.
Yeah.
That's not what I lean on more. I lean on more of the fact that like I'm this person who I believe that I want to make the world a better place by opening up conversations like this, right? And to me, I actually don't mind not being thought of as the rich guy who could fly you and buy you whatever you want, because that doesn't even align with me.
Sure. But not a lot of people think like that, though.
That's the hard part, is how do you discern between what you want and like what's being fed to you?
So many people want the other thing and will try and will die trying to be that thing. For why? And like, the scariest part, I think, for me is the inability to have authentic conversations. Now it almost seems so like the proper term is like scripted, but it's like not really scripted. It's just them going, being so heavily influenced by what they see and what they think people want to hear, or the impact they want to like be viewed that they're like doing, that like I'm like, wait, huh? And so I'm like almost wondering, like, are people really tapping in with themselves and like, you know, getting there and portraying that, or are they simply just a little bit of all these very random things?
I think that's what it is. I think a lot of people, like, we're being fed dreams that aren't ours. I remember this day where I went to the gym. I was in the sauna, and it was just like so I pay attention to social media, right? Like this, and I pay attention to what dreams are being sold.
Yeah.
Like, go into these riches, make money drop shipping, go into crypto, buy a Lamborghini, things like that.
Yeah.
And I remember I was in the sauna, and there was this kid. He was probably like 12 years old, and he was having a conversation with this guy who was probably like in his late 20s. He brought up the fact that the kid was bringing up the fact that he owned like 3 businesses.
No way.
Makes X amount of money.
No way.
And the guy was like, "Whoa, you're really smart for your kid." He's like, "Yeah, I do drop shipping, like basically everything that was like being fed to him." And I was like, "Wow, that's crazy at such a young age to feel compelled to have to be like these figures online that, to be honest, is probably like the 1%, if they're even being
Also
honest about what
speaks
they're
volumes
doing."
that you're telling this person, maybe that to a stranger within like the first 10 minutes of speaking to them.
Yeah.
So I'm like appalled in many different levels, like the age, the conversation, what the heck was said. Like, what? That's scary. That's
It
like
is.
scary.
It's scary because, for one, he's too young, right? And I don't mean too young to be a successful business person. I'm sure some people could do it, right? But I mean too young isn't like to grow up that quickly. You kind of strip yourself of your childhood. Like kids, yes, you could invent, do things if that aligns with you, and you're one of the few. Perfect. But he was speaking as if he took idea from this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and he doesn't know what he wants to do from himself, so therefore he's going to compile all these ideas and make that his identity.
It's so sad. It's so sad because it's like, how do you go back from that?
I mean, it's hard when you're a kid because you're so easily
Oh,
influenced,
for
right?
sure. And like talk about like as adults we get influence
Yeah.
from some of the like, let the ad be good enough, or let, someone have good enough conversation. But a kid, I mean, this is where I be aging myself, where I'm like, my time. I'm like, we were the last generation of, of just like being granted such beautiful, like normal moments. I saw Reading Rainbow documentary and was bawling my eyes out because I was like, dang, we don't have that. Dang, kids nowadays don't have that. Getting excited over a book, you got Instagram. I love, but dang, dang. Yes, it's a lot. It's just a lot. But I think the biggest and the scariest thing when it comes down to the nitty gritty is the impact that it has on mental health. That's what drives me. That's what just drives me, because some people aren't as equipped to handle the things that are out there.
I think most of us aren't. I think what it is it's new, right?
Yeah.
It's not something that we have a bunch of research
No.
on, and not only that, technology moves really fast.
Oh boy.
So as soon as you get a grip on one thing, here's the newest and latest thing
Yeah.
that they put in front of you.
Yeah.
So how do you adapt to a degree, right? And think, I don't know the answer. I believe there should be some kind of like pillars of mental health that you have to check off to make sure that you don't go spiraling.
I'm like, how easy it is to do that though, and no one's checking in on that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's so scary to me. Let you be going through real life things, hard things, and here you go. That first scroll, let that be the not thing that you need to see. And like, it just makes me sad because as a mental health advocate, I'm like, ooh, there's a lot to be done.
Yeah. So I do a lot of research on mental health too. And, one of the things they tell you not to do is to scroll your phone or touch electronics the first thing when you wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you learn a lot about like dopamine and
Yeah.
serotonin and how it affects you. And, when you're scrolling, everyone knows this. Everyone by now knows this, that you get little hits of dopamine as you're scrolling, right? Like cheap satisfaction,
I mean,
basically.
it's wild. You can go from like happy video, sad
Hmm.
video, angry video, like,
Emotions are everywhere.
whoa.
But what I learned is that as you're scrolling through this and you're getting these hits of dopamine, like dopamine is supposed to help in the willpower category.
Mm-hmm.
But when you scroll through so much of it, you just burn out your dopamine receptors, and you, at the very end of the day, you have no more
Yeah,
willpower
it's like a
to deny
mental
these
workout,
things.
and you're
It is.
sizzled by the end.
Exactly.
That rabbit hole you just went down. Ooh, ooh, that's scary stuff. It's cool stuff, but also scary,
Yeah.
you know? And so, like, how do you take care of yourself?
I mean, I think it goes through those like pillars of mental health, right? I think someone needs to do research on it and see what has withstand like the test of time,
Mm-hmm.
and like what you need to do, because you mentioned something like you didn't know how to deal with that kind of stillness,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're coming from the generation where we did have reading rainbow.
Yeah.
So imagine a generation that doesn't have that stillness, right? They have access to content anywhere and everywhere. They could, I'm guilty of taking my phone to the
I
restroom.
mean, same.
So, things like that where it's like it applies in all aspects of life, no matter how much technology changes.
Yeah.
So stillness, I think, is something that we've lost. Very few of us know how to do it. I think there's a reason why ads for meditation has been pushed on me so much, because it is needed.
Stillness and aloneness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have too much of too many things.
You're constantly stimulated. And it's weird because, so, there's this, I think he's like a psychologist, or he's like a neuroscientist. Basically, he knows things about the human brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he talks about addiction a lot. And I've quoted him before. His name's Gabor Mate. But when people ask about addiction, it's like, well, why are they addicted? He always answers like, why the pain? Not why the addiction, but why the pain. And, just like how we're addicted to our, phones, like, why are we addicted to phones? Because we feel very uncomfortable with the idea of sitting with our own thoughts,
This is true.
and so we use it to escape, right? And obviously, the algorithm, the way it's structured out, is to keep you constantly scrolling and feeling like
Wild.
that. And, why do we have this problem of sitting with ourselves? And I think what it is we don't want to deal with our own thoughts and inner demons, and I think everyone has it. And it goes
Sure.
back to like, why am I the way I am? And you don't sit with that, right?
Yeah, and that's obviously too much work, right? We're like
Oh,
used to
yeah.
getting things so quick and so like great. Like you see, like even when you see a video, let the video be 2 minutes. You're like, too long. I want to see it in like 5. And that's the same thing. It's like if you sit with yourself, you see what the work you have to you do. You're like, oh, way too much work. No need. Like, why am I even gonna go there? And so it's not getting addressed. And so now we're just, it's pushing towards just people not being in tune. And I think that's why things like this are crucial. Like, talk. People don't talk,
'Cause it's harder now.
Like, they just don't talk. And there's been proof, like, times you date that back. Talking helps with anyone, right? Preferably a stranger. It helps some more, right? But it just does something for us that's like unexplicable. But that value's kind of gone out the window, right? Now it's like you can easily put a quick little band-aid on whatever it is and keep it going. That's my biggest struggle with like where we're at with things, because I value conversation so much. And saddest thing is it's so difficult for some people to even have that, for even to identify very basic things within themselves. You can ask a question and they're just not in tune with that way. Not in a bad way, like of being judgmental of them. It's simply in the way of like that simply not being something they've been asked or have exercised or have even like given any thought to. And you're like, ooh,
Yeah, when I was younger, I used to think that when things become more convenient, they make the world better. That's what I used to think.
yeah, okay.
Right? I always thought like, okay, but before, like the car seats that where you could just move the knob and like they move it for you, you would actually have to like
Mm-hmm.
turn the thing,
Yeah.
or pull the lever in order for it to like sit back. And I was like, wow, this button removes the fact that you have to lift up the seat.
Literally.
So I'm like, okay, constantly like, oh yeah, let's make things more convenient. But I don't believe as human beings that we're supposed to live a frictionless life.
No.
Like, I'm starting to understand more now as an adult. Like, there are things that you don't necessarily have to do, right? It should be convenient, frictionless. But there are a lot of things in life that requires friction, right? Because things grow under friction.
They just do. Even though you like really down to the core don't want them to, there is method to that madness. There really is. And like we live and we're only going towards that conveniency more and more so everything. And now you're like, that's a huge selling point for a lot of things and places is conveniency, and people will go for it because they're like, oh, don't want to do this, or oh, this is going to save me so and so. And like that's just where we're at with things. And that actually gives me yet again another point of like another reinforcer, at least for me, that I'll take with me back home, because the friction that I've experienced in my life with this huge change that I went through is necessary. And now I almost feel glad that I was given that opportunity to grow, because most and more than half the people are simply in this space of comfort, and that's not bad. That's not bad. But I'm also not mad at this, because this came with a lot of gems that will help me navigate life deeper. And so you need friction is what I'll take from you. We all need it. Now, do we want to just say, hey, knock it off, stop there, enough of it? Sure. But we need it. It's scary to think that a lot of people don't have it, which is why these people behave in the way that they do.
Yeah, I mean, without friction, you could expect to stay in the same place, So I totally understand that, and it's weird because we weren't grown, or at least taught while we're growing up, to look in the way of friction all the time. I think our parents tried to protect us a lot, and that in certain ways kind of keeps us stunted, right? I'm sure there's like a level of friction,
Sure.
a level of difficulty is like you probably shouldn't go that
Right.
way.
Right.
We're not here to make our life as hard as possible, right? But enough for us to grow from it. I think that's what it is. And it's hard sometimes for us to figure out where that fine line is,
Yeah.
Like like we're talking about relationships with no arguments, right? It's like, oh yeah, we don't argue, frictionless, easy.
And that being valued.
Yeah, but then you left LA and you go live somewhere else with your husband, and it's like you're now building a life together, and really there's way less exterior variables, right? And that was hard and that's difficult. But I hear this all the time when couples move. It's like, this is gonna be the make or break.
Really?
Yeah, I hear it all the time, because then this is like the life that you've built just on your own, just you two, right?
This is true.
You have no backup. I mean, now we could FaceTime and stuff like that, but as far as like in proximity to us, it's like you don't have that. So everything that keeps you together is just you, and everything that keeps you apart is just you.
This is true, because in that realm, when you have any issue, it can feel like it's under the microscope. You're just like, because it's just you. And so now it can feel like, oh, great, right? But it can also serve as like a whole lesson if you're able to push past and figure it out. which you do and you will if you can, right? If your partner gives enough and you give enough. Um, but I totally agree with that. 1,000%. 1,000%.
So I want to talk to you about, you said you were working in mental health and then now you work in domestic abuse, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are very, very heavy things, as we
Yeah.
both know. And that takes a toll on a lot of people, but you said it gives you purpose.
Yeah. Yes. Challenging in its own way because of the sensitivity of what you're dealing with and the seriousness of what you're dealing with. There's a level of danger that I wasn't used to when working in what I was working before. It's in the similar world of like social work things. Here, I would help parents who had their children taken away stay on top of their case plan, get what they needed to get done so that they can reunify. My job was to like, hey, make sure that we're checking off all those boxes. Now, yeah, some of my clients have court cases, right? Because of now this domestic violence piece. But now I'm helping survivors that have either left a domestic violence relationship, are still in one, or anything domestic violence related is what I'm doing. It's extremely heavy in a different way because I feel like you have that weight of like guilt if you don't address right away. And so you have to really find your balance on how you're going to help someone and be of help and help them feel supported, but then not sacrifice your own. Do you know what I'm saying? You really do have to put it down.
Yeah.
You want to teach, hey, look, this is how you keep yourself safe until the next where I can come and intervene. But it's wildly heavy. Some days you listen to things where you're like, Jesus Christ, right? Like, it puts things into perspective. And so that's why I feel like it's given me a sense of purpose, because some of the things that I already know and I'm well aware of, they're not aware of. Like some of the basics on dynamics of what a healthy relationship looks like. And for them too, it goes down into maybe some types of their childhood. And so if that's all they saw, they only saw a certain thing during childhood. Now they're only seeing this one thing in this relationship. They will literally not have the tools to leave that. And so I feel valuable because I'm able to give tools that, for me at least, are very, that any person should know and have. And they just simply didn't have that in their life. It's crazy to think of, but it is true.
So I have a question for you. This is a thought that I've had. You know, I've had conversations with my past significant others, and a lot of it is pretty unanimous that they want to keep our personal life personal. Like, I'm sorry, personal life private, right? And I think there are exceptions to that rule. And in a case of domestic abuse, I think that's probably one of them, right? And I think when your partner is trying to silence you from speaking to your community, your tribe about things like that, you're probably not the best person to assess if that's good if you guys stay together or not.
That's what's so tricky. And I smiled when you said that because I hear that so often. Sometimes when someone, a survivor, comes to our program, they just simply, one, their partner may not know they're there. Most of the time, they don't know they're there. And so that's tricky because that's the first time they've ever been in this space to talk about the things that they know is troubling or it has already been brought to the surface because of an actual incident, right? And when you hear that in your head, you're like, what a way of like taking someone that's already very vulnerable and making them feel just a little bit more trapped. What a way of convincing them, because any normal person, let's say you're in a non-abusive relationship, sure, you don't want to share all the ins and outs, right? There's a level of disclosure that you'll get to, and then you kind of like cap it at that. But that's distorted and morphed into something else when you have abuse, and that should not exist when you have abuse. And that's not what survivors get. And so it only invalidates their experience even more. because now you're adding confusion into the mix. And now they're going to look at you and be like, so I don't know what's what. This still doesn't feel right, because they're being taught this is not right. You shouldn't be heard. You shouldn't tell anybody. Who are they to know our personal life? Right. So
Yeah.
sometimes they'll come at you pretty apprehensive, right? You have people in like all scopes of their journey. And so it's like such a unique, thing to address every single time. Everybody's needs are different. Their way that they were raised was different, and why they came to the situation was different. So you're like constantly on your toes on like, okay, how do I best support this person through this moment? And that's not convincing them or giving them information to leave the relationship. That is at their decision always. You simply give the tools and you let them do as they need. Safety is at the biggest thing always. I just always reinforce safety. You do what you have to do. You keep yourself safe. Bring your kids safe.
Do you think there's any coming back from that though? Like you said, it's not. Obviously, you have to stay out of their personal business. You're not here to influence them whether to
Sure.
stay or leave. But based on what you know,
As in coming back from a domestic violence relationship into like a healthy,
yeah.
what we would say normal relationship maybe in the future. I say yes, but it's a lot of internal work. And you have to be consistently vulnerable, which is extremely difficult. Right. And so you're hitting walls pretty often because, again, you're always fighting the idea that the person was intentionally told repeatedly, no, 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 no. You don't do that. You don't do this. You don't do that. You don't share. You don't make decisions. And so when you yank them out of that, you literally are yanking them out of an entire way of thinking, of functioning, right? This is normal to them. It may not be to you and I, but it is to them. That's the cycle of abuse, right? And so when you yank them out of that, they're literally in a space of like, they doubt their own decisions. That's what the person wanted, right? Because that's the only way they're able to take that power and control. Right. And so they were able to keep them manipulated long enough. So it's such a confusing, very tough process. And so, yes, they can, but they're constantly fighting. And so a lot of people get into the point, this is the saddest part, where they say things of like, maybe staying was easier. Of course, because what? Now you're facing housing issues. Now you don't know if you're going to be able to make a living for you and your children. Now all these, you're not facing all these uncertainties. That you knew was certain. Was it healthy? Was it the best for you? No, but you knew what to expect from that. Now they're facing a whole nother road where they're like, I don't know none of that. And each thing takes so much work. And here you are sitting there like, you should take that road, the harder one. Just go, keep going. They're going to look at you like, what? You're insane. And so you have to know how to cultivate that, be gentle, and to slowly get them to understand why that road is as long as it is and why it's worth going down. But boy, is it hard.
Yeah, that
It's
sounds
hard.
tough.
You can want it all you want for people sometimes, and they just may not be in the space to, not this time around.
Yeah,
And so you have to respect that. That's tough.
that's tough.
Sometimes you'll move mountains and then you get a nice, move that just reverted and you're like, oh. Or one that put them in danger and you're like, oh, why?
Yeah, that's tough. I know that you said that you feel purpose in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel like you chose that career path?
I don't know that I did willingly, not to work with the population willingly. When I moved, I wanted to stay as close as possible I could into anything mental health wise or anything that I can do hands on to help people, similar how I did here. And that opportunity arose with this program. I knew nothing of the ins and outs of domestic violence. And so I've had to and still continue to educate myself on it because it's very complex. And so it wasn't a deliberate choice, but once it came about, I was like, I'll take the challenge, right? And challenge it was, because it still is. It just is. Every situation is so different that you're like constantly having to like tune here, tune there. Oh yeah, let me get this resource. And you have to be so many things in one for this person. And sometimes they even look at you like you're my last hope. And so you carry a lot, you know? And sometimes you wish there was more out there for them. You're also fighting the fact that you're on an island. And so, yeah, you can't say go to the next county. You can see an attorney there. You literally can't. Like the resources are slim to none. The danger arises yet again, right? Because you're on an island. How far can you really go? These are the things that you just are like, whoa, domino, yet again.
I've had domestic abuse in my family, and I kind of want to go over a situation with you.
Yeah.
Not from my personal experience, but let's say, outside of you being a professional, what you do, let's say I have a friend who's going through it, like I believe they're going through it.
Sure.
I don't know. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like maybe she had that black guy before. I don't know. Things like that. How should I approach it as a friend and not like a professional?
It's tough because it would have to depend on the situation, but I'll speak as general as I can with
Okay.
that. In general, if there's any opportunity for you to address, ask a question in the most gentle way that you can. One, I always say tone matters. Time and place matter. And so this could be a great conversation you had, but you be mindful of what's going on, who else is around, preferably in a private space and in person. I would really suggest not to do this ever via text message or email or anything, because now it's documented and you don't know if the other person has access to that. You can place them in danger. Do this in person, in private. Watch your tone, as in like not in a scary way, but just watch how you are approaching. This is a very sensitive thing, and this person may feel shame over what is happening to them. And so just think of it as like you're slightly cracking a door open so that they can see, hey, look, I'm here. You crack it, you don't widen it and say, hey, look, this is what I think is happening. Please don't. I would simply say, hey, look, I noticed this. I noticed you had a black eye. I know that you said it was this. If for whatever reason it happens to be anything else, just know that I'm here if you want to have a conversation about it. I just want to make sure you're safe. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be anything of sorts, right? You plant the seed is what you do in that person's mind. At least they now know they can come to you. If and when they're ready, they take that opportunity, amazing, right? I will say this, you have to tread lightly with your boundaries and not pushing for something you want that the person may not want. Because what you can do is, yeah, they trusted you, but you could also very easily shatter that and they just pull out. And so if you want to be helpful, the biggest thing is be gentle with your approach. Gentle and kind and just genuinely concerned. You're allowed to if this person's your friend, right?
Yeah, I've always been curious about that because, that's one of the conversations that I could have had prior. I had a friend who he was the person committing that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I wasn't very vocal about his situation. And it became, a, it was a bad situation. Like, I don't know how to say it more than that without just straight up saying that, they're not around anymore, in some of those cases.
So
And
sorry.
I don't. Oh, that's all right. I've had a lot of time to cope and grieve, and to me, there's a part of me that still doesn't know what to do. And I try. I don't really blame myself. I used to say I try not to blame myself. Now I say I don't blame myself because I think about it. It's like, oh, could I've had a conversation that might have changed the direction that he was gonna take?
Okay.
And it was hard because we never found a time for it. It was just like, oh, we're gonna go have fun and have a good time, and it's kind of a weird conversation to bring up that
Of
I heard
course.
maybe there's some domestic abuse going on, but now I'm like, damn, there's not. It wasn't. I wasn't really trying to find the perfect time. I
Because there
think in
may
my head,
never really be, but
yeah,
mind you, if like you're gonna go have a good time, then
hmm
obviously that may not be the time. And so if maybe let's say that's the time in which you were normally around this person, then it's gonna be hard to find the time, right? Because
exactly.
it's not appropriate. And I think it's super valid and it makes sense as to why for however long that you may have carried that, right? It's hard to separate ourselves from that, especially when we have a tie to the person or
Mm-hmm.
persons involved. You very easily, it's so easy to sink into the what if, right?
Yeah,
Had I had this conversation, would that have changed the trajectory of things? And the saddest thing is that it may or may not have.
yeah,
And I'll give you a similar example. I volunteered on the suicide hotlines here when I lived here for 2 years. One of the biggest things that I learned is that one, you never want to take the opportunity off the table for them. That's not for you to do. But then two, any friends and family that have been impacted by suicide, right? The biggest thing that they will often feel is guilt. And the one of the biggest things that I learned was that that's not their guilt to carry. Is it natural that they'll feel it? Sure. Right? And will hopefully they work on it to resolve that? Yes. But one thing you want to reaffirm, and I would like to reaffirm to you today, is that simply it's just not your guilt to carry. These levels of relationships, these have way thicker layers to them that peel back than most normal relationships that don't have the level of abuse. Abuse comes with so much from each human, from the person being the offender to the person receiving it to the people around. It can be extremely painful because for the people around, you almost get to the point where you feel like you're being asked to sit back and watch. It's the most like disturbing thing because as a friend, they may want you to hear but not want you to help necessarily. They and I'll refrain from saying the word help. They won't want you to intervene. For whatever reason. It could be a huge scope of reasons. And that's the hardest thing is that as a friend, you have to accept that. And that's tough. Like there's just no other way to look at it as that like that's a messed up situation and there's just no other way around it. And so sadly you're the one that has to then work through that and realize that that's for you to release because it wasn't for you to carry even if all those things made it feel like that. Friends and family suffer a lot watching this all unfold because for them, it's literally watching it unfold because they're just seeing it from the outside and they're like, gosh, right? Because for you and I, we can see things so much clearer and that person simply can't. Both of them can't to their own extents, right? That's where anytime I hear the cycle of abuse, that's what I learn the most. That's what it is. It's like this vicious, gross cycle that is so easy to slip into. It starts off so, sometimes, can start off so, as a matter of fact, just, it could even seem so kind sometimes. Like, oh my gosh, someone's just really, they care for me so much. They really just want to make sure I'm good, which is why they called me so many times. They're always watching out for me. It's like for someone that hasn't felt that type of love, you're like, dang, this is great. Thanks. And it can quickly take a lot of different turns. And that's just like a hypothetical example, right? But it can start so innocent. It could seem so charming.
yeah. I've definitely seen that even in my own relationships.
Mm.
Where it starts with exactly that, like, oh, like this person's constantly asking where I'm at,
Yeah.
or like constantly calling me,
Yeah.
and then you start to notice things. Like I would be like, oh, 100 back-to-back missed calls is kind of
Yeah.
excessive,
Yeah.
and a little manipulation here and there, and all of a sudden you're spiraling into a relationship where it's like, whoa,
How
how did
did
I
we get
end up
here?
like this? How
Literally.
how did I get like coerced into like staying? And then you don't want to like think about it. It's like, oh, I'm my own person. I make my own choices. So maybe
Yeah.
it's just me. But at the same time, you gotta look at the whole picture and be like, how did I get here? Is it just by my own accord?
And that's the biggest thing when I talk to any survivor is that I want to validate them like through the roof and not in a superficial way, but in the way of like, yes, what you went through is real. This is what this is. And when you attach certain terminologies and certain aspects of like domestic violence and what these things are, they're like, I went through all of that. Do you know what I'm saying? When they see it like out in front of them, they're like, I went through all of that. What's so tricky is that when someone experiences psychological and emotional type of abuse or really intense manipulation, those get so easily swept under the rug by someone who's really good at manipulating that those could be extra challenging to bring forth for the person and say, hey, look, this is real. This is not necessarily a healthy form to go about this. This should not have happened to you. Right?
Yeah, that's tough.
It's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. And then also kind of like being able to distinguish, it's hard, you know, okay, what's a toxic relationship and what's domestic violence? You know, like how do you differ? Or like, oh, this only happens like literally when they drink, or it only happens when they're under the influence of X, Y, and Z, right? There's so many what ifs, and so it becomes confusing for people, and they're like, I just, it doesn't happen enough, I'm okay.
Like he's only done it once
Yeah,
when I yell at him or something, which is why now I
sure.
don't, yeah, that's tough. I've seen it enough where I think my problem now is, like what you were saying, like you kind of have to sit back, which is like a weird feeling.
So strange.
It's really strange. And it's almost like, okay, are you complacent in this happening almost?
And the short answer, I would say no. If you have done your best, and like even if that's on a very like short to the point level of having that conversation, or at least cracking that door open for them, that's as much as you can do. Though sometimes even as a service provider, I have to check myself with like how much I'm involved, because no, one, you can really place someone in danger, and then two, they may not be in that space and you could only get them to retract further. And so if anybody ever knows or suspects or thinks, and I please encourage you to like crack that door open, whatever feels natural to you. I won't give an example because like I don't know the level of anyone's relationship with their friends and what is normal for them to, say to each other. But I'd say just be gentle, but crack it so you give them something to go off of. Right. And sometimes people may take you right up on it and they were just waiting for, they may not want to say it out loud or be the first one to initiate that. So those are the types of things that I think I pride myself on when it comes to working with this population, is giving those little its and bits of information so they have aha moments and that they can themselves connect those dots and make small changes. I don't have any expectations for the people that I work with. I simply want them to be safe. You can figure out all the ins and outs. I just want you and your children to be safe if they have kids, Yeah, that's what makes that fulfilling though. Hard, but fulfilling.
I think there was a part of me that felt guilty because I was his friend
Yeah.
and he committed those atrocities. And, it felt like the crowd went two ways. It was either they demonized him, no longer acknowledged that he existed, or some ways felt sympathy for what happened, and it was almost like the people who felt sympathy, we were demonized as well for affiliating. And that's tough because I have this personal belief that, you are a product of your circumstance, right? And while what he did was monstrous, I know for a fact he was a good person at one point, just like how every baby is born innocent.
Do you
What I mean?
know, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's okay.
Mhm.
Did he ever have that conversation with any of your other friends that you know of, or did anyone else?
So, I mean, it's been a while now, so I mean, we probably talk about it a little bit more. I haven't really gone to depth about this too much, but so he had moved away to another state, and I'm just not saying things just to keep it
Sure.
more anonymous. And he found himself doing some like illegal activities to make money, and he got into a relationship, ended up having a couple kids, and just had gone down kind of like a slippery road,
Okay.
which most of us weren't really aware of
Okay.
because he was just that fun friend that we hung out with who had felt like he had got himself out of dark times. And whenever we would see him, it was just like good times. And then I would hear instances of abuse through the grapevine, so not
Okay.
directly. And first I was in denial, like, no way. Like, he would never do that. I
Right.
think that's typically the reaction. And then I didn't know how to address something that was not 100% for sure.
Also, you're far, right? You're not in the same
Yeah,
place.
we're not in the same place, but we do see each other pretty often, like every
Okay.
other month or something like that. Either I
Okay.
go up or he comes down,
That
and
adds to the challenge of this
yeah,
conversation that could have potentially happened. Time and place doesn't
definitely,
seem like was
yeah, because you don't have enough time in one
right. When you're
place to
catching
do
up,
it.
it's like catching up. Okay, fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would hear about it and I didn't know how to address it because at that point you're just being accusatory, right? Where
Hmm.
that's almost worse because you're walking into this conversation very ambiguously. Like, I'm not saying that you did this, but if you did, like, how do you address like that? Because if you're wrong, then it's almost like, how can you think that of me? And then if you're right, it's like, okay, so where do you go with this information?
I think for you, and if it's okay if I interrupt you really quickly,
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I think it adds to the complexity for you though, because your friend happened to be the one that was, you know,
Yeah.
what we would consider offending or the one that was doing this, right? It makes it challenging. And so if I can offer maybe in your case what I because our program also works, we have an offenders program, so offenders come to us and go through, we have, that's a separate program they go through. I work in the survivors unit, but one thing that the offender program emphasizes, and maybe that could have, or for anyone that feels that they're in your same shoes, um, accountability is how they approach everything. You're simply holding, you're trying to get them to understand whether or not they're able to be accountable for themselves. And you're not necessarily being accusatory, but what you could have conversation wise said would have been something along the lines that included level of accountability. So your conversation is more open ended, like, hey,
Mm,
look, you know what I'm saying? I understand sometimes we go through X, Y, and Z. Not sure if this has happened for you. I'm not sure if this is happening at all, but has X, Y, and Z ever led to any form of violence or have things gotten physical, where you maybe under the influence of something, if that's what he was doing at the
mm,
time. And so it's tougher when someone is a friend of the person that could be the one being the perpetrator in this
mhm,
case. Um, in our program, we will always simply try to get them to hold themselves accountable for what they did. And that will tell you whether or not they're able or in the space to acknowledge. There is such thing as rehabilitating and understanding. And a lot of the work that's done on that offender side is internal inner child work. There's a lot of usual connections to inner child stuff for those that are perpetrating that act as opposed to a survivor. We don't have that same approach. And so I don't know if that was his case or not. But I can see why it must have felt even tougher to have this conversation that's already sensitive and still similarity tough to crack that door open because it's not the same, right? I gave the example of talking to a survivor, right? You would give the example of trying to talk to someone who is your friend, has been your friend. This is someone you know who's fun, right? And having to feel like you're being accusatory. You're simply not. You're just saying, hey, look, I'm just concerned, you know? Not sure if any of that has any validity to it. that's how you can strip the accusatory out of it, you know. But I'm sorry, you were saying.
Oh, I mean, I was just mentioning like that it's difficult because I believe that there is recovery,
Yeah.
right? And the
Yeah.
reason why I say that is because like my dad was very similar, right? And
Sure.
he is what I would consider recovered, but almost in line with infidelity, abuse is something that is demonized to a way where people are outcasted,
Yeah.
right? And I truthfully believe that that is you're that person's less likely to recover if they're outcasted by the people that
You
care
need a
about them.
strong support system, a support system that believes in you too.
Yeah, and I think to a certain degree, if you outcast these people, because yeah, no one agrees with what their actions,
Right.
but if you outcast them, it's almost like if you lose everything, what do you have to lose at this point?
Was your friend group all in the know?
Not everyone.
Okay.
No, not everyone. I think it was some of us, but not everyone.
Okay.
And we had little hints and like little stints that would happen, and eventually when it happened, everyone found out,
Sure.
and at that point, it was news, and it was just insane because it was. I wouldn't say it was like 0 to 100. It was probably like 70 to 100. Like we kind of already had an idea. And yeah, it just left me thinking like what can I do in the future to not maybe prevent it, but maybe like in the very least like delay it. And yeah, it's just been something on my mind because I've never really had to deal with the victim side. And unfortunately, being a guy, and unfortunately, the perpetrator typically being a guy, like it's more common for us to be friends with them.
Yeah.
And if there's anything I know, it's like what it means to be a guy. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that I've strayed away from. I'm not unfortunately. Fortunately, it's one of the things I strayed away from seeing it in my upbringing. But at the same time, it's not something that I'm super comfortable with addressing now in my adult life.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I think even more so knowing that you may know someone that could be hurting someone. Like, yeah, there's no shock value to that. Like, that's horrible because this person as so and so, right? And you maybe only see this other side to this person, right? And to even associate the two can make you feel like this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like I should be talking about this. I don't have the right to talk about this, right? And so in the same way, the only thing that I can do is you crack that door open, you approach it in the most gentle way that you can, as you would with a survivor, and you are not being accusatory. You're simply saying, hey, look, this isn't the space. If this is something you're going through, I'm here. And you can keep it casual. It doesn't have to be super formal, right? You keep it casual with what would have been normal for you to say, right? It doesn't have to be any of which way. That's why it's so difficult for me to give an example, because I'm like, everybody has a relationship with every one of their friends differently.
Yeah.
And so I simply say crack the door is like you crack the door for that uncomfortable conversation to happen, and just approach it in the space of like, I just want you to be safe. I want you and your family to be safe.
Okay.
And
yeah.
safety could be the biggest thing. If all fails, you talk about safety. I just want you guys to be safe. Okay. Not many people can be mad at that.
That's true. I think that's where I'm trying to tread lightly. It's like, because I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want people to be mad at me, but there is like a bigger picture at hand, right? And if that's, I agree. I think that's a great way to address it. I don't know if you noticed, I was kind of like laughing a little bit, and that's because I already feel how uncomfortable that would be, and that's like my coping mechanism. But
it's okay. It just, to me, I just see it just is. And if all fails, if let's say you're that person, you're having that conversation and you're feeling a response because you're like, gosh, I hate this, lean on safety. Safety's your backup at all times.
All right, so I was thinking about a new segment I told you about today. It's called Tea Time.
Yes.
Where we keep it positive.
Love that. Little positivity for the people.
So share with us
I'll definitely say this, and since just because we went so in depth about my transition to Hawaii and my big move and all that change that it brought, I want to bring to light what friendships not only mean, but what they can do. And what I really want the goal of me even talking about this to be is I want people to really foster, really feed, really water those relationships. It doesn't matter if you're far. And so, in my personal experience, I have a wonderful support system. My girls that are here in Los Angeles, right? And in whatever realm, you may have your own system of friends, but things happen in life, right? I moved, people have kids, their life changes too, right? And so, one thing that I'll say is maintain that and water that, because it literally can be your lifeline on an emotional level. It truly can be. When you're feeling all sorts of wacky, your friends have a way of grounding you. They know you to that extent where they're just, they can say silly things that make you laugh, right? It can change your day. I have a best friend who, before this trip, she already knows how wonky I get and emotional I get before coming back home, literally sat on the phone with me and was like, okay, walk me through what your days are going to look like. What things do you have listed out, and she turned all this chaos that was going on in my brain, mind you, because I don't have many friends out there. I have all these thoughts to myself, so I can't process all that on my own. And so she literally called out of nowhere and she's like, I know a lot's going on. You're probably feeling all the feels. Like, let's talk. And she even did that before me flying out. And like the change in my actual, like, one, mood, to like internal, I literally felt like, easy girl, like just chill. It's okay, because your mind just goes. And when you let your mind go, it does scary things sometimes. And so when someone's like, hey, 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 come this way and stay here, like, you're like, thank you. Yeah. And so for me, yes, that's changed. I've had to water my relationships differently, right? Texting, FaceTiming, and things like that. But I encourage that. Reach out to your friend that just had a kid, or that is feeling maybe in their own like world, just different. They just don't feel themselves, give them grace. Say, hey, I'm thinking about you. Like, when you think about someone, text them that. Because I know when I get those text messages, I love them. They like brighten my day. When my friends send me like a voice note, I'm like, I love you guys, right? Because you're just like, you guys are so cute. It's like their voice, it feels so real. You're like in the middle of your day. It could be a weird, wonky day. And like you play that and you're like, home. Right. And so my approach on this, like, positive tea we're going to get into, is simply do that. And if you notice that you had wonderful friends that maybe you like fell out a little bit out of touch with, or you've gotten busy, you can say that too. Just say, hey, look, life has happened, but I miss you. Do you care to like meet up? And like, that's cool too, right? Just have those conversations, because again, to re-emphasize, they really can be your lifeline. And it's beautiful to have friendships, to have authentic friendships in all realms of life. They can really carry you through different moments in your life. And I love that. So that's my little tea.
Thank you for sharing. And it's funny to kind of add on to that. Guys, we have I would say, more difficult time of expressing these things. I think we're getting better at it as we understand how to navigate our emotions and express what we truthfully think and feel. But our version, it's like we'll send each other memes, and that's kind of our way of saying like, hey, how you been, bro? Like, you hope
I
you've
love
been good,
that.
and eventually it leads to that if you nurture it enough. But
Yeah.
it's just funny how you and your girlfriends handle things, and how
Voice
us
notes.
guys,
We
it's
love
a
the
little
voice
different.
notes. But yeah, same. You can through gifs, memes, Instagram stuff you share. These are ways, like random ways to connect with someone that can bring someone back, like,
Yeah.
or just say, hey, look, I'm there, or those like little cute videos you see online and you're like, oh, this is cute. Let me send it to my friend. Things like that are like gold, especially when you're going through it. Literally, it can, again, just be so grounding. That's what I love.
There's this exercise that I need to keep up with. I haven't
Ooh,
as
what is
much.
it?
It's just basically, people have gratitude journals, but
Yeah.
instead of having a gratitude journal, what you do is you text 3 people that you're grateful for. And if you do that every day, there's a couple things, right? One, it's like you realize why you're grateful for them,
Mm-hmm.
and you express that, and that brightens up their day. Typically, what happens is you get reciprocated, so it brightens up your day also.
Oh,
So it's kind of a good like action to take
yeah.
if you just
Yeah.
want to kind of cause like a positive feedback loop.
I
But
love this. I'm actually going to try this because I haven't heard of that.
mhm,
And I'll do the hey, thinking about you text, that's
mhm.
as much as I'll go or I've tried. But little things like that are super unexpected, but so nice. Like they're just, again, reaffirming
Yeah.
and you love them because I can no longer like do notes or anything like that, right? I'm not here. Um, but yeah, I'm going to try that one.
All right, so I have some questions for you.
Yeah.
So my first question is, what makes Stephanie uniquely her?
I want to say the multifacetedness in like the random things that I do that encompass me as a human being. I'm totally fine to express myself creatively, to go down that way and go try to do my best academically, even though I'm not gifted, but we go for it. And every single aspect about me, I just embrace it, especially those emotions. When you feel heavily, you can easily want to turn that away, put it like in a bottle somewhere and just say, hey, no, you're not coming out to play. But I embrace it. I'm like, that is me, and half the time I just have to balance and make sure I'm like easy. I'm not being super much. And so that's what makes me uniquely me. I welcome a lot of interesting aspects to myself wholeheartedly, even when they can be a little intense sometimes.
Second question is, what was a monumental or pivotal time in your life?
A very pivotal moment in my life was me losing my uncle. I lost my uncle, who was my father figure, the year before I graduated high school. I say that it was a pivotal moment in my life because it really sent me down the path of where I think my heart goes into doing things for others. I lost my uncle to suicide, which is why I volunteered on the lines for 2 years. And he's really been the driving factor behind a lot of my decisions. And he also supported my creativeness because he was a model himself. And so I think it was pivotal, not necessarily the best moment in my life. I'm glad to have had him as long as I did, but pivotal because it really kind of shifted my gear. And then I ended up going down a much different path, both academically and where my priority shifted after that.
Silver lining in that one, that's tough
For
to see
sure.
sometimes. All right, and my third and last question is, how do you want to be remembered?
Just loving and feeling really deeply, and for people to like laugh at that and then also be confused by that. But also just in the true realm of things, my authenticness to really want to help people, because man, we struggle. Humans struggle. And we need each other. Even if we don't say it, we need each other. And so if I can help any person at all in whatever aspect, I would love to be remembered by being willing to do so and being willing to have conversations with people. Thank you.
All right, I want to say a special thank you to Steph for sharing your story and how you're
Yes.
dealing with it, because I know a lot of people have a hard time with leaving their identity and moving into a new life, and just coping and finding community. So I
Sure.
want to say thank you for that, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for all the tips too, because we don't talk about things like domestic violence a lot because it is an awkward conversation to have, but I
Sure.
think everyone should have knowledge of it to a certain degree.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you. I was able to talk about a lot of different things in my life. And I just hope if that resonates with anyone at all, I'm here for open conversations at any given time. So yeah, you guys can follow me on Instagram, or again, you can shoot me a message. I'm totally fine for that too.
And what's your Instagram handle?
That's right. That would be helpful. My Instagram handle is underscore, it's Steph Jones. Or you can just look up Stephanie Jones and you can find me there too.
And I want to say a special thank you to the audience for watching all the way through. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below what you guys want us to talk about next time. And remember, live fast, eat ass.